It's nothing but truth.
Nothing but truth.
On AFR Talk.
Happy Friday to you. You've made it. Bottom of the hour, U.S. Bureau Chief LifeSite News, Ben Johnson, who broke some news this week. We'll talk about that story regarding navigators and Planned Parenthood, access to information. We will also be discussing how the now president, in a speech and an event commemorating the 50th anniversary of the I Have the Dream speech, talked about ultra-wealthy, ultra-nut bar, right-wing ideologues. Why did she talk about that? We'll find out, bottom of the hour. Right now, I want to go to the interview that Chris Cuomo had aired this morning on CNN's morning program, and Chris Cuomo asked the president about where the buck stops when it comes to the gridlock we're seeing in Washington. B27, let's roll it.
Ultimately, the buck stops with me. And so anytime we are not moving forward on things that should be simple, I get frustrated. And, I've said before, and I continue to say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get Congress, and Republicans in Congress in particular, to think less about politics and party and think more about what's good for the country.
Well, we see the behavior certainly in sequester and the threats and fear-mongering, as well as the inability to be flexible when it came to the implementation of that. Is he more interested in playing politics? We will see. But the president continued in this discussion and talked about the Republicans, specifically on the issue of not funding Obamacare, but funding the government, which could lead to a government shutdown. Roll it.
I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get Congress, and Republicans in Congress in particular, to think less about politics and party and think more about what's good for the country. And then finally, now what we've got is Republicans talking about the idea that they would shut down the government, bad for the economy, bad for not just people who work for the government, but all the contractors and the defense folks and everybody who is impacted by the services that they receive from the federal government. We should shut that down because Republicans, after having taken 40 votes to try to get rid of Obamacare, see this as their last gasp. Nobody thinks that's good for the middle class.
Well, in fact, if we look at hiring and business owners and their response to what has been called Obamacare, we certainly see it's not viewed as a popular program. In fact, the majority of Americans are against Obamacare. The implementation of it has had 56% of the dates missed on the implementation of the program, deadlines passed, and we've had selective enforcement, if you will, of the law. But the president continued and said, hey, look, a lot of Republicans agree with me. They're afraid, though. They're afraid of the Tea Party and Rush Limbaugh. Roll it.
And I've made this argument to my Republican friends privately. And by the way, sometimes they say to me privately, I agree with you, but I'm worried about a primary from, somebody in the Tea Party back in my district. Or I'm worried about what Rush Limbaugh is going to say about me on the radio. And so you got to understand, it's really difficult. I can't force these folks to do what's right for the American people. But what I sure as heck can do is stay focused on what I know will be good for the American people.
If you're expecting a challenge from Chris Cuomo after that, you're not going to get one. The fact is, this is a man who says plain politics is what's happening. And he has shaped the narrative as the Republicans shutting down government because they don't like Obamacare. And yet the deal is the government would run, but they would not fund Obamacare, which is picking up, by the way, the support for that. We'll get to that a little later. Arguably, you can go one way or another with how you're going to view that in political strategy. What gets me about this is the Republicans, in every interview I've seen, be it on Fox or otherwise, the interviewer says, well, regardless, it doesn't really matter because the Republicans are going to be blamed for it anyway. that should tell you something's really wrong. If there are two sides to the story, certainly. And yet Republicans are going to be blamed anyway for this. And it's because the president has a larger microphone or megaphone. But here's my question. If the press were doing its job and highlighting what has taken place with Obamacare and why Republicans are not going forward and choosing to defund it, as well as highlighting the president's own suspension, exemption of deadlines and, well, Congress, respectively, maybe the debate would be a bit different. The idea is, well, you're going to lose anyway. You're going to be blamed anyway, so why are you going to even do what you believe the right thing to do is? Perhaps that narrative should be challenged first and foremost. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. On the flip side, our good friend, U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News, Ben Johnson, broke the Navigator story regarding Obamacare and Planned Parenthood. He's with us. AFR Talk.